Hey everybody, Marcus here. One needs to learn to follow before one can lead. No one starts as a general in the army after all. No, you start as a rank and file private. You are then taught the ropes over years of mentorship by experienced people, and then eventually, with sufficient experience, you attain a rank where you are allowed to actually make some decisions. Where this seems obvious in the context of the army, I think this has been forgotten in the online space. The YouTube hustle culture pushes the entrepreneurial mindset as if this is some sort of viable starting point. Few and far between are people who possess anything resembling leadership skills, well, at least when they're young. But today, unless you are your own boss, you are painted as a slave of the system or some sort of tool. There's implicit shame built into this hustle culture. You are made to feel like a loser if you are not immediately some sort of business owner straight out of school. The notion of a dead-end job is also a damaging concept. I worked a dead-end job when I was in university. I was a washroom attendant, and that dead-end job provided me with enough money to hold me over until I brought up my skills to be able to pivot to software. Then, I worked for other people for years before I attempted my own business. My first software business, in some sense, succeeded. I managed to sell it and cash out for a non-trivial amount, but it wasn't fuck you money. No, I went back to work for others after that. Looking back on that software company, I see a massive missed opportunity. It could have been much bigger than what my leadership skills and experience allowed at the time. Simply put, I was only good enough to achieve a certain scale on my own. Re-injecting myself into employment for someone else bought me time again. I was in a holding pattern. I worked for others until I figured out where I wanted to go next. I hated my software job, but I had not yet decided on what else to do. However, the money I was making was sufficient to, over a decade, accumulate a war chest. This war chest had no specific designation. I saved because I could. I saved with the hope I would find a purpose for that money sooner or later, one day. Then, finally, I pivoted to music. Music turned out to be where I should have been all along. However, I was never allowed to do it. Being a musician is a joke in my family. When I switched to music, I had to also go to war with my family. No one supported me. Now, when I was 16, I was told I was just a stupid teenager who didn't know anything about life, and music was just throwing my life away. When I was near 40, I was told I am too old to switch to music, and I was just throwing my life away once again. It seems like there never could come a time where anyone in my family would ever accept the idea of me being a musician. However, the difference at 40 was that I was no longer under the shame-based control of my parents. There was no version of this story where I could have psychologically won this war when I was 16. It was only near 40 that I had sufficiently grown and armed myself in inner strength to fight that battle and win. Now, I knew since I was 16 I wanted to be a musician. But due to the environment I was in, I was forced to push that out of my mind. It took me over 20 years to remember that it was always music that I wanted to do. That's the crux of it. I knew what I wanted to do with my life all along, yet somehow it was still possible for my life circumstances to suppress this awareness from me and set me on a different path altogether. Had I forced the issue at 16, it would have most likely resulted in failure. Even today, with the experience of someone past 40 and a decade of leadership experience, running a band is tough. But the conditions for achieving success have never been better for me than they are right now. On YouTube, you see hustle culture gurus pushing their way of life onto the masses like my parents pushed their way of life onto me. They use shame to hawk their wares, shame masked as encouragement and motivation. Their masked message is, you are a loser unless you live as we do. No, you don't need to run your own business or be your own boss. It's a pain in the ass. It's an enormous sacrifice that requires a great deal of upfront risk, and being your own boss means being responsible for the survival of the business. As a rank and file employee, well, you could care less about the enormous amount of details a business owner needs to worry about. You need only concern yourself with the narrow scope of your responsibilities. You get to keep a great deal of mental space for other things. things not connected to your job. Why are even so many YouTubers burning out? Well, because they are living the dream of being their own boss, yet somehow the dream is not as sustainable as they imagined. The costs have exceeded their perceived value of the occupation. The entirety of your mental space is sunk into the business when you are your own boss. Every waking hour is consumed with either work or thoughts related to work. This notion that you will just get your business up and running, then hand it off to someone else to manage, well, it's kind of a pipe dream. No one will ever manage your business as well as you can, because no employee will ever care about it like you care about it. Handing off your business to someone to manage immediately makes you aware of this truth. Your employees are definitely not sinking their entire essence into managing it like you did. Then, you watch as your business starts to slip. As your business is not being taken care of as well as by others as it was by you, well, you'll start to meddle. And if you meddle, you are once again back to managing your business. Being a business owner is not a job. It's a way of life. It's not even a way of life that is particularly rewarding after a certain scale. However, if you want to achieve the results that are sold to you as the dream of running your own business, you will need to cross that threshold of satisfaction into tedium and frustration. You will cross into the world of shit work a lot sooner than you will see the promised results. When that happens, you might actually long for a time when you worked for someone else. I had talked about justice in my previous video, namely, to live according to the sort of creature you are. To discover what sort of creature you are may require you to live a journey similar to mine. You may know early on, but not have the resources to enact it. In my case, it was the psychological fortitude, the lack of mentors, tools, or, for that matter, educational material. There was no such thing as home production of music when I was 16. There was barely an internet, much less the resources that exist today. My journey of becoming who I am and wanted to be necessitated a long detour for the world of software. It is easy for me to look back and inject regret into having wasted so much time. Yet the time, well, I don't think it actually was wasted. It seemed to have been necessary for both myself and the world to align in a way that finally enabled me to begin my life as a musician. So, my entire software career was no more than a 20-year-long holding pattern, as I would call it. A life on rails in a sense, as I mostly went from one software company to another. Life, after all, is not a race. There's nothing but the grave waiting for any of us. Your journey, like mine, will have its own twists and turns regardless of what you do. As such, one cannot force an outcome whose time has not yet come. I remember one piece of advice I gave my sister about how to guide her children in relationship to school. I told her that if they don't know what they want to do with their lives, then they should be pressured into a good field like medicine or software. Sure, they may hate what they do, but they will ultimately find themselves in a position that will generate for them resources over the years, so when they do finally figure out what they do want to do, they can pivot with ease. If failure, in this sense, for them means ending up a doctor or engineer, well, then so be it. It's better to have mastery in a high-paying job you hate than in a low-paying job you hate. My advice to the young men struggling to figure out what, well, they want to do with their lives is exactly this. Go for a high-paying job or job with status. Hate it if you must. Leverage that job as a holding pattern until you figure out your calling. Think of it as your starter career and not your destiny. And like Nietzsche said, when you have a why, you can suffer virtually anyhow. Your sacrifice is in service of the calling you have yet to identify. As such, your suffering is in the preparation for your calling. Don't start a business if that does not feel like your calling. I mean, don't gamble on entrepreneurship as if it's some surefire way to success or fulfillment. It's not. It's a form of hell for anyone not meant for it, much like any other job that they're not meant for. Worse still, it's a far higher risk than taking the starter career approach. I mean, if you were to give a fresh recruit a battalion of men and send him off to war, he would get everybody killed. And this is what these hustle culture gurus are doing. There are telling swaths of people who are completely not suitable for leadership or entrepreneurship to go and lead their own life into oblivion. Your decision of which job to do today is not a life sentence. Your plan can and will change when you and your circumstances change. Working a job you hate, well, it sucks, but it's a hell of a lot better than living a life that is going nowhere at all. Thanks for listening. Go team.